step down into darkness, open my eyes, let me see the beauty that made this heart adore you, and hope of a life spent with you. And here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. You're the King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above. But humbly you came to the earth you created, all for love's sake became poor. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Sing that one more time. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. And I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. I'll never know how much it cost to see my sin upon that cross. I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. And here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Here I am, Lord, here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. You're so good, so kind, so wonderful and true. And I'll never know just how good you are. I'll never know. love him so. I love him so. Oh yes I do. I love him so. I love him so. He's so good to me. And let's praise his name. I praise his name. Oh, I praise his name. I praise his name. He is so good to me. Oh, you're so good, so kind. You're worthy of it all. You're worthy of it all. From you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. You're worthy of it all. From you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. Yes, you are. You're worthy of it all. Yes, you're worthy. You're worthy of it all. For from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. Let's just sing that one more time. Oh, you're worthy of it all. Yes, you are. You're worthy of it all. Oh, from you are all things, and to you are all. From you are all things, and to you are all things. Yes, from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. From you are all things, and to you are all things. Yes, from you are all things, to you are all things. Yes, from you are all things, and to you are all things. So you deserve the glory. You deserve the glory. Yes, you deserve the glory. You're worthy of it all. You're worthy of it all. For from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. You're worthy of it all. Yes, you are. You're worthy of it all. From you are all things, and to you are all things. Yes, from you are all things, and to you are all things. Yes, from you are all
dich, Herr. Deine Gnade ist mir sicher. Seit Anbeginn hältst du mich in deine Hand. Von morgens früh, wenn ich erwache, bis ich mich wieder schlafen leg, oh, werde ich singen in der Güte des Herrn. Mein ganzes Leben warst du treu, Herr. Mein ganzes Leben warst du so gut. Mit dem Atem, den du mir gibst, oh, werde ich singen in der Güte des Herrn. Ich lieb dein Wort, du fröstest mich sicher das Feuer, und in der Nacht warst du so nah wie sonst niemand. Ich kenne dich als Vater, ich kenne dich als mein Freund, so lebe ich in der Güte des Herrn. Mein ganzes Leben warst du treu, Herr. Mein ganzes Leben warst du so gut. Mit dem Atem, den du mir gibst, so werde ich singen von der Güte des Herrn. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. When my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. When my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Mein ganzes Leben warst du treu, Herr. Mein ganzes Leben warst du so gut. Mit dem Atem, den du mir gibst, oh, werde ich singen um der Güte des Herrn. Oh, werde ich singen um der Güte des Herrn. God, I thank you that you're so good. You're always good, God. Goodness is not something that you do, it's who you are. It's in your character, it's in your nature, Lord. You're always good. Father, remind us that you're good. Remind us that you're good. Remind us of who you are and who we are in you. We thank you for your goodness, Lord.
Amen. Yeah, so that was an incredible time of worship. We have a chance to raise our voices, lift our voices together, and to sing his praises together. What an incredible time that we can share as a body of believers, even though we're meeting together online. This is the way of the church. This is the way of Christ. And if you're just now joining us, I want to introduce myself. My name's Rob. I'm the pastor here at Saddleback Berlin, and we are so glad that you are here. You can see that we have so many things already decorated. This is the Advent season, and we are thrilled that you're here with us this morning. My kids started decorating about this time last month. So we were excited about Christmas. We had like double the amount of Christmas cheer. And we're very action-oriented family, especially this time in 2020, ready for Christmas to actually show up and to get here. So we're thrilled about that. And I want to let you know about a few things that we have coming up at our church that are super important that you're dialed in on, okay? And so the first thing that I want you to know is that Class 101 is coming up, okay? And this class, if you haven't taken Class 101, now is the time to do it. It's actually going to be one of those shortened versions of class. It's going to be about 2.5 hours long, but we're going to do that over the course of 2 nights on Zoom. I'm going to be teaching it. We already have a lot of people signed up, but it's very interactive, and it's actually fun, too. Don't let the class words scare you on this. It is the class for discovering what your life purpose is, what the purpose of the church is, and it's a great way to meet some new people and maybe find out a little bit about what makes our church, we think, a unique and a very special church over the last 40 years. And so if you're interested or if you're thinking about becoming a member, this is also a class for you. I get the occasional email that comes in, how can I be a member at Saddleback? Well, this is the way to be a member at Saddleback. And so I encourage you to sign up for that. You can go up to the at saddleback.berlin, just go to our online connection card, and you could find that there and just type in the word Class 101. Give us the info, and then we'll send you the Zoom link, okay? Also, I want to let you know we're doing something called Food and Faith. We're looking to be little light bearers, right? Little ones who actually carry the light of Christ out into the city, out into the darker parts of the world. Just as Christ calls us each to be a city on the hill, he's the one who has called us to show love, especially this time of year. And many people are looking for love, and they're looking for answers. And they sometimes are around Christmas, people sometimes come to the church and are seeking answers about life's toughest questions. So we encourage you, sign up. We already have several people who are signed up for this ministry. We'll send you some dates and some times soon, but this is just a chance for you to actually hit the streets of Berlin and to put love, literally love, by giving food into the hands of those who are in need this Christmas season, and inviting them to pray with you and praying for them about different things they may have going on in their life. So this is going to be great. We encourage you. We have a lot of other ministries and small groups that you can find out more information about at saddleback.berlin, and I encourage you to check that out. Today, we are going to hear an incredible message from Pastor Scott Sauls from Nashville, Tennessee. This is kind of like close to my hometown, so I'm actually glad that we're hearing from Pastor Scott this morning. He's going to share a word with us, a sermon that's called The Power of a Gentle Answer. Now, maybe you've known somebody. I've known different friends and maybe even relatives who you have in your life who they just kind of explode. If you do something, if something gets knocked over, or you say something, and all of a sudden they just boom! It's like dynamite, right? It just explodes, and it actually pushes people away from them. And they have this personality that just is kind of like, I don't know if I actually want to be around them. I might actually do something wrong, and they could blow up on me. Isn't that weird? How sometimes a blow-up kind of personality can actually push people away. But Jesus calls us to be love and gentleness to those that we encounter. He wants us to have truth, yes, and to express encouragement in a way that isn't distracting from his purpose in their lives. He wants us to be loving, and he wants us to have a spirit of gentleness. And there's great power in that. There's not weakness, there's great power in showing gentleness to people and wrapping our loving message, the message that the church should have, in a spirit of love. So we're going to hear from Pastor Scott here, and I'll see you back here after the sermon. Okay?
Now, you know that I pray for you literally every day. I do. I pray for you every day. But sometimes I need to ask you for prayer, and I'd like to ask you to pray for me during the next month. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. This month, November, is the 25th anniversary of the book Purpose Driven Church. Not Life, Purpose Driven Church. I wrote it in 1995. It's the only book, I've been told, on the church that sold more than 1 million copies. And that was years and years ago, and who knows where it is, but they said it's still a bestseller today. And so they want me to update it 25 years later and bring it all up to date, all the stuff we've learned since I wrote it in 1995. And I'm going to add in stuff that we had never talked to them about. And so during the next month, I'm doing that. And I'm going to ask you to be praying for me that God will give me clarity of thought as I revise that book that has already influenced literally hundreds of thousands of churches, and literally over 1 million pastors have gone through the conference. Now, one of the ways that I like to keep you growing spiritually is to introduce you to voices and to ministers and ministries that you might not know about. And this week, I want you to meet a friend of mine named Scott Sauls. Scott is the senior pastor at Christ Presbyterian Church in Nashville, Tennessee. And when I wanted to put together this new series before Christmas on being a winsome witness in a warring, worn out, and weary world, that's quite a mouthful, being a winsome witness in a warring, worn out, and weary world, I knew Scott would be somebody I wanted you to hear. He's not just been a pastor, but he's been writing books on this theme for some time. And I want you to be aware of his books. While he was senior pastor at Christ Presbyterian Church. 2015, Scott wrote the book, Jesus Outside the Lines, a way forward for those who are tired of taking sides. Now, in that book, Scott shows us how polarizing and the idea of us against them, those kind of discussions, it just divides us, it distracts us from thinking clearly and from communicating lovingly with others. And then in 2016, Scott wrote a book called Befriend, Creating Belonging in an Age of Judgment, Isolation, and Fear. And in that book, in Befriend, he points out how easy it is today to avoid people that we disagree with, or to avoid people who just have had a different life experience, that it doesn't match our own. But he says, you know, if you play it safe, and you only hang out with like-minded people and peers and digital, quote, friends, then you don't have to engage those who can challenge you and actually enlarge your very limited perspective. And sadly, even the church today can become a place that reinforces that kind of isolation, and you don't really grow in certain areas. Then in 2019, Scott wrote a book called Irresistible Faith, Becoming the Kind of Christian That the World Can't Resist. Isn't that a great title? Jesus was irresistible, and he wants us to be the same. He wants us to go out in the world, and he wants us to add value in the world, leaving people and leaving places and leaving things better than we found them for the glory of God. Now, this year, in 2020, Scott's new book is called A Gentle Answer, Our Secret Weapon in an Age of Us Against Them. And he asks, you know, how can followers of Jesus Christ model a better way of living? How can we be the kind of people who, as Proverbs puts it, turn away wrath? In other words, lowers the rhetoric, lowers the anger in society. It's a great book for these days when our civilization is becoming more uncivilized and more incivil, with perpetual anger and attacking and outrage. So with those 4 books in mind, I knew Scott would be perfect for this series, being a winsome witness in a warring world and a weary world and a worn out world. So get ready to be blessed. Let's welcome Scott.
Hello, Saddleback family. It's a privilege to be with you today, and I want to especially thank Pastor Rick for his gracious invitation to open the scriptures and to talk about winsome faith today. And I'm going to read 3 passages of scripture. They're mostly short passages, and the first one is Proverbs 15:1, and it says that a gentle answer turns away wrath. We live in a society right now, in a culture, in a climate where there's a lot of wrath. There's a lot of us against them. There's a lot of raging. And this proverb couldn't be more timely. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Now, the second verse is a verse that might sound a little bit contradictory to Proverbs 15:1. It's Ephesians 4:26. And Ephesians 4:26 says, "Be angry and do not sin." I'll unpack that in a little bit. And then the main passage of scripture I want to focus on is Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart." Remember that word gentle. Gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So just a few weeks ago, I saw a picture on Instagram, and it was a picture of 4 portable bathrooms. You know what those look like on construction scenes. And they're all in a row, 4 of them, and they're all on fire. And the caption to that photo of the 4 portable restrooms on fire was, "If the year 2020 were a scented candle, this is what it would look like, and this is what it would smell like." This has been a very difficult year. Words that come to mind are words like outrage, over-politicizing things, radicalizing things, division, contempt, tribalization, polarization, us against them. This has been a year to end all years of people turning against each other, of people feeling anxious about getting canceled, about getting scolded, about getting unfriended in various ways. And one of the big words that's used this year, it might become the word of the year, is we live in unprecedented times. Now, I don't know about you, but I really look forward to the days where we live again in precedented times. I'm tired of unprecedented times. But the truth is that the year 2020 is not unprecedented. In fact, since the beginning of time, people have been turning against each other. If you go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, and then they realized that they had sinned against God, and then they started sinning against each other. They started shifting blame. Adam says to God, "The woman you gave me, she gave me the fruit." And in that statement, he's blaming both her and God. So he's already turning against his wife and against God because of the thing that he did and the shame that he feels because of it. And then in Genesis chapter 4, we see the 2 sons of Adam and Eve. And one of the brothers turns on the other, and we see history's first murder, where Cain murders his brother Abel out of envy, out of jealousy. And the rest of history has been the same. In fact, the entire Bible, except for 2 books, Song of Solomon, which is its own category, and Ecclesiastes, which is written by a wealthy, powerful man who is also struggling, and he's actually very miserable. All of the other books in the Bible were written by somebody who was either a slave, who was in jail for their faith, or they were running for their life from people who were trying to hurt them or even to kill them. And so violence has been, and aggression has been, and people turning against each other has been a dynamic ever since the beginning of time. And it's been amplified, I think, in times like ours. because of things like social media, because of things like internet and cable news and the way that we often use those platforms and those mediums to express our outrage. And so what a wonderful thing to me, and I suspect it'll be a wonderful thing to so many of you listening in as well, that Mr. Rogers has become popular again. Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, that nerdy cardigan sweater wearing, soft-spoken, wiry man who ran a low-budget kids show on PBS called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, is all of a sudden a cultural icon again. What is it about Mr. Rogers that's making him popular again in our time? Why is he re-emerging as a cultural icon so many decades later? There's a documentary that was released about his life just a couple of years ago. It was wildly popular. And then, of course, Tom Hanks starred in a film as Fred Rogers. And it was a blockbuster, and everybody was drawn to it. Everybody loved the film and what it portrayed about this man. I think that Mr. Rogers' renewed popularity is an indicator of something. I think that there is a silent majority that longs for what Mr. Rogers brought, and that was the fruit of gentleness, the fruit of kindness. Gentleness, kindness, or as Jesus describes himself, humility of heart, are in incredibly short supply. And I think we're all longing for a return of those attributes, of those virtues, of those ways that people actually can treat other people. It says in Galatians 5 that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. All of these words, all of these fruit of the Spirit are ways that we can be a counterculture kind of people, different in a life-giving way, not against our culture, but for our culture, not against our neighbors, but for our neighbors, by treating them in the same way that Jesus chose to treat us when we were standing against him. You know that Bible verse that says that God demonstrates his own love toward us in that we were still good people? No. In that we were still loving people, faithful people, believing in him kinds of people? No. While we were still sinners, while we were still acting as his enemies, while we were still doing violence in our hearts toward God, that's when he sent Jesus to die for us. God demonstrates his own love, that he would give himself for his enemies so that we would become his friends, and then we would become family, sons and daughters of God. And so having been loved this way, we are now invited to go out into a hostile world and love our neighbors. This Mr. Rogers phenomenon is an amazing phenomenon because he gives us all what we long for. One of the things he gives us is empathy. Empathy is being able to crawl in somebody else's skin, to understand them, to have compassion toward their unique hurts and hardships and struggles and pressures. Maybe you've also seen the movie Wonder or read the book by the same title, where at the end of the story, the little protagonist of the story, Augie Pullman, draws a conclusion about everybody in his school, where there's a bunch of bullies, a bunch of queen bees, a bunch of people working out their insecurities by hurting each other. And he says this, he says, be kind, because every person you meet is fighting a hard-hidden battle. Be kind, because every person you meet is fighting a hard-hidden battle. And he was referring not only to the unpopular kids, to the disfigured and disabled kids like himself. He was also referring to the jocks and the cheerleaders and the popular kids. Every person you meet is fighting a hard-hidden battle. And in fact, the meanest people, some of the meanest people, are mean because they are deeply insecure and probably injured as well. You've heard the phrase possibly that it's hurting people that end up hurting people. And so Mr. Rogers and people like Mr. Rogers come into the world with the fruit of the Spirit. He was a Christian. He was a believer. In fact, he was an ordained pastor. And Mr. Rogers comes into the world in a counterculture sort of way, in a way that is different than culture, in a good and life-giving way. Mr. Rogers was somebody who made a commitment to treat everyone with the same kind of dignity that he believes that Jesus treats every kind of person. He would give unbroken eye contact to whoever he was with. People would get annoyed and frustrated with Fred Rogers because he would always be late to meetings, because he would just be completely fixated on the person in front of him until that conversation was through, because he respected and honored the dignity of the person in front of him. He was unhurried. He was a deep listener, wanting to empathize. His favorite words, Fred Rogers' favorite 3 words were, "I like you." How many times have you heard those words in the last year? How many times have you heard those words in the last decade? And yet Fred Rogers took every opportunity that he could to look somebody in the eye and not just say, "I love you," because you can love somebody and not like them. Or, "I respect you." You could respect somebody and not really be warm in your heart toward them. But to hear the words, "I like you," is to hear you matter. It's to hear, "I want you." It's to hear, "You're important to me." And Mr. Rogers looked for every opportunity to tell people those 3 words, whether it was through a screen to millions of kids, including myself, or whether it was in person to the people or the group that was in front of him. In so many ways, Fred Rogers was an embodiment of that verse I read earlier from Proverbs 15:1. "A gentle answer turns away wrath." You might say that Mr. Rogers was what the Bible calls the aroma of Jesus Christ himself. If you've ever read through the Gospel according to John, and if you haven't had an opportunity to do that, I would highly recommend that, especially as we head into the Christmas season, just to get to know Jesus by reading the Gospel according to John, who was arguably Jesus' closest friend, who called himself the beloved disciple because he felt so seen and so loved and so adored by Jesus that he knew himself as the beloved disciple. One of the things that John does in his gospel is he records what people call the 7 I am statements of Jesus. Jesus says, "I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door for the sheep. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. I am the way and the truth and the life. I am the vine." That's 7 I am statements that tell you a whole lot about who Jesus is, what he was like, and who he can be for you. But then in Matthew chapter 11, there's one more I am statement that Matthew the tax collector, and people didn't like tax collectors at all, but Matthew knew that Jesus not only loved him, but also liked him. So much so that Matthew felt empowered, just like the beloved disciple John did, to write a whole accounting of Jesus' life in the Gospel according to Matthew. It's the first book of what we call the New Testament. But in Matthew chapter 11, Jesus says, "I am gentle. I am gentle and humble in heart." You want to know what God is like? You want to know what Jesus is like in the middle of a hostile world where people are turning against each other and who are turning against God either by raging at him for how hard things are or by just flat out ignoring him and pretending he doesn't exist? In that kind of world, in a hostile world, you want to know what God is like? "I am gentle and humble in heart. I like you. I am kind." Because every person I meet is fighting a hard, hidden battle. So Mr. Rogers, the cultural icon once more, teaches us a lot about who Jesus is and what Jesus is like. But there's an unexpected emotion in there that I'm going to bring to the table that was in the second verse that I read that isn't a contradiction, surprisingly, to the gentleness and kindness of Jesus, but actually helps to complete it and helps to fuel it. And it's the emotion of anger. Stay with me. Stay with me on that one. The surprise impulse behind the gentleness and kindness of Mr. Rogers and of Jesus Christ and of so many other people, including, I dare say, your Saddleback family, which I'll get to in a moment, has been driven by, in part, emotions like anger, like grief, like sadness, like hurt. These are the emotions we call the negative emotions, but negative isn't necessarily a bad thing all the time, and I want to unpack that a little bit. So this past year, this past summer, I released my latest book project, and it's based on Proverbs 15:1, and it's called A Gentle Answer, Our Secret Weapon in an Age of Us Against Them. And the most curious question that people have asked me about that book, it comes from people who haven't read it, but they've seen the table of contents. It's the title of chapter 5, where it says that gentle people do anger well. What's that all about? How can anger be compatible with gentleness? Well, I think there's a clue here in Ephesians, and Ephesians is also quoting a place in the book of the Psalms in the Old Testament that says exactly the same thing. Be angry and do not sin. Now, I realize that some of our translations are going to say, in your anger, do not sin. But if you go all the way back to the original language and the original Greek text, which is where we get all of our English translations and all of our translations into other languages, it starts with the original Greek text, the original Greek manuscripts. It is unmistakably saying this: be angry. It's actually a command. And do not sin. There is a way to lose your cool without losing your character. There is a way to take a negative emotion like anger and actually use it for good. Romans puts it this way. The book of Romans says, hate what is evil and cling to what is good. Those two things go together. Part of hating what is evil is clinging to what is good. And part of clinging to what is good is to hate what is evil, right? Because evil things are things that attack good things. Evil things are things that attack the purposes of God. Whatever is lovely and excellent and praiseworthy, evil wants to undermine that. Evil wants to attack that. Evil wants to wipe that out. Evil wants to run like a wildfire against all of God's good purposes, of all that is right and true and good and beautiful and excellent and praiseworthy and kind and gentle. Evil wants to make a train wreck of those things. And we need to hate that in order to defend and protect and advance what is good. So I hope you're still with me. Anger, maybe this will be helpful. Anger is a lot like fire. There are two kinds of fire. There's a raging fire, and many of you in the Saddleback community, especially those of you who live along the California coast, you know what a raging fire is. You know what a fire gone wild can do to an entire community, to property, to beautiful hills with all of this natural beauty. A raging fire can wreak havoc on all of these things. But a righteous fire cooks bacteria out of food so that our food is healthy and we don't get illness from it. A righteous fire, and I know you California folks won't understand this, but maybe some in the international Saddleback community will. A righteous fire keeps you warm in the winter cold, for those of us who live in parts of the world where it gets cold in the wintertime. A righteous fire can create a lovely, beautiful, relationship-enhancing ambiance around a dinner table or around a fire pit, where people use fire pits, or a fireplace where people have fireplaces. There's a beautiful ambiance that can come from fire. So there's raging versions of fire that is completely destructive, that needs to be confronted. And there's a righteous fire, which are those healthy, life-giving, beauty-enhancing uses of fire that we just want more and more of in our lives. So I'm going to make a radical statement here. to continue to talk about this kind of righteous versus raging anger, contrast. Jesus, here's something about Jesus. He was gentle and humble in heart, but he was not nice. He wasn't schmoopy nice. He wasn't a nice guy all the time. He was kind. He was approachable, especially if you were broken down from sin or from sorrow. He was the most approachable person you would ever meet. But when he was met with a bully or a self-righteous religious person or somebody who was making a habit out of hurting other people or wreaking havoc on communities, Jesus would get pretty angry. He flipped tables over in the temple. Can you imagine? You imagine Pastor Rick going out into the lobby of the church and just start turning over tables and flipping over the book tables and getting angry. Jesus did that. I've never done that. I don't think I'll ever do that at my church either. I doubt Pastor Rick will do that. But Jesus did that because he was so angry at the way that people were corrupting the worship of God. They were looking at church as a way to make money, as a way to profit, as a way to direct attention toward things that would profit them instead of toward the goodness and greatness of God. Jesus got angry at death. John chapter 11, that's another place where we have the actual meaning of the original Greek words hidden a little bit, because most of our English translations say that when Jesus looked at the tomb of his friend Lazarus, who had been dead for 4 days, it says in our English translations, most of them, that Jesus was deeply moved in spirit. The literal translation was that he was furious, mad as a hornet, angry as a bull, about to go in battle or to go on the attack. He was angry at death because of what death does to people created in the image of God and what death does to communities. It's a horrible thing. Or when the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious professionals, were using their religion to make themselves powerful and to put other people in their place and to scold and shame people and to treat people in an angry, raging way in the name of religion. Jesus just opened up on them with a whole slew of words. You are hypocrites, you are whitewashed tombs, you're blind guides, you're fools, you're sons of the devil, you're negligent, you're merciless, you're greedy, you're wicked. He's the Lamb of God, gentle. He's also the lion. He's fierce. He's kind, as Romans says, but he's also severe sometimes. Romans says, consider the kindness and the severity of God. He is gentle and humble toward the weak, but he's also a fierce defender and protector of the weak. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is in the 7th chapter of the Gospel according to Luke. And a woman who is a sex worker, a prostitute, she barges in to a dinner party that is being hosted by a group of religious professionals, scribes and Pharisees. And the scribes and Pharisees have invited Jesus to this dinner party, not because they want to show him hospitality, but because they want to scold him, and they want to discredit him, and they want to ask him gotcha questions, as people always tried to do with Jesus. They didn't like the grace of God at all. They liked rules. They liked control. They liked imposing religion on people instead of persuading people to look to God and rest in his love. They got it all backwards. So this woman comes in unannounced, uninvited, and remember, she's a prostitute, and she uses the tools of her trade, her lips, her perfume, and her hair, to wipe Jesus' feet, to anoint Jesus' feet, and then to wipe Jesus' feet. She expresses affection to Jesus the only way that she knows how, and Jesus graciously receives it. And the religious professionals are infuriated, and they start calling her names, like sinner. If he knew, if Jesus knew what kind of thing that she was, he would know that she's a sinner. If he were a true prophet, he would know that this is a sinner. But Jesus says, no, we're not going to treat her like a thing. We're going to treat her like a person created in the image of God. We're not going to treat her like an it. We're going to treat her like a she. And by the way, while we're on the subject of her, you haven't offered me, Jesus says to the religious bullies, you haven't offered me the slightest bit of kindness or the slightest bit of hospitality, and yet from the moment she came in here, she has expressed love and affection for me. In other words, he says to the worship professionals, to people with jobs like mine, to the pastors of the day, this prostitute has just put a clinic on for you about what it really means to be in a worship relationship with God. It's all about love. It's all about love. And she has been forgiven much. And the way that the way that she has been forgiven has been demonstrated is that now she's become a person who loves much. That's the impact of being forgiven on a person. If you are aware of how deeply you have been forgiven, you are going to be a person who loves others. Do you see what's happening in that occasion? You've got both the gentleness and the fierceness of Jesus at play at the same time. Because in standing between the religious bullies and this woman, Jesus is essentially saying, if you want to get to her, you've got to go through me. And by the way, if you try to go through me, you're going to lose. And so what feels like a fierce confrontation to the religious bullies feels like gentle, caring treatment to the woman behind him that he is defending. That's what you call mercy and justice at play. You've got the kindness of God toward her expressed in his severity toward those who are angrily and violently bullying her and trying to dehumanize her. You see how it all works together. Raging anger attacks people. Righteous anger attacks problems, especially problems that attack people. I'll say that again. Raging anger attacks people. Righteous anger attacks problems, especially problems that attack people. C.S. Lewis, who's a favorite writer of mine, said in his book, Mere Christianity, that Christianity is a fighting religion. And he went on and he said, Christianity thinks that God made the world, and it also thinks that a great many things have gone wrong with the world that God made, and that God insists very loudly on our putting them right again. And then he went on to say, if you read history, you will find that those who did the most for this present world are the ones who thought the most of the next world. In other words, what C.S. Lewis said is that the more heavenly minded we are, the more earthly good we're going to be. And this is played out in the course of history. Did you know that Christians founded the idea of the hospital? And you probably, in your cities and towns, wherever you live, there's probably a hospital or two nearby that begins with, the title of the hospital begins with the word saint. In my town, it's St. Luke's, St. Thomas, etc. You know, the origins of healthcare, and I know you're a church that is very invested in global healthcare initiatives. Healthcare was founded in many ways by Christian people. Did you know that every single Ivy League university, except for one, was founded by Christian ministers and lay people? Did you know that the orphan care movement started with a Christian, George Mueller? Did you know that the abolition of the slave trade started with a Christian, William Wilberforce, who was pastored by John Newton, who was the writer of the famous hymn, Amazing Grace? Martin Luther King, in the name of Jesus Christ, as a Christian, fought for racial equality in the civil rights movement. Or if you fast forward to today, our friend Christine Caine fights against sex trafficking industry all over the world. Mother Teresa fought on behalf of the unborn and of the poor in the name of Christ. Well, how about Saddleback? How might these wonderfully utilized negative emotions be at work even through the beautiful ministries of your own church? Celebrate Recovery. That's a program that we have at our church, Christ Presbyterian Church in Nashville. And we have you to thank for that, because Celebrate Recovery was founded out of Saddleback. Somebody had to have gotten hurt or felt hurt over the dehumanizing effects of addiction to start a wonderful ministry like Celebrate Recovery. See, a negative emotion, the emotion of hurt, brings good into the world when it's used for redemptive purposes. Or the wonderful mental health initiatives, especially spearheaded by Kay Warren. Somebody had to feel the negative emotion of grief, to go on the attack against the crippling effects of things like anxiety and depression and temptation to self-harm. Or the COVID food distribution. I was told by one of your staff members, by one of your team members today, that you all have done remarkable work making sure that hunger is addressed by providing, I think the number was either 500,000 people or 500,000 families were fed, and through the process, something close to 17,000 people put their faith in Jesus through that one incredible effort, because somebody felt sad, another negative emotion, about people going hungry because of this crippling effect of this terrible disease we know as COVID-19. Or your Global Peace Plan, the Saddleback Global Peace Plan, where somebody had to get angry about what's happening on the African continent, the spiritual emptiness, the racism that is there, the lack of education, the presence of transferable diseases, poverty. Somebody had to get angry about the effect of these things on humanity in Africa, for instance, to do something about it, to start such a remarkable global initiative. I think I read somewhere that your church community, this is a great case for generosity, by the way, that your church, I think it was in 2015, it was just a few years ago, gave something like $70 million, give or take. I hope I'm getting the number right, but something close to that. For these kinds of initiatives, that is incredible. You are leveraging what C.S. Lewis was talking about, that Christianity is a fighting religion. We hate what's evil because evil vandalizes good things, good people, good places. Evil vandalizes the world that God so loved, and so we hate evil. And so we do good in response to that. Winsomely so, right? To use that wonderful word upon which this series is based. Madeleine L'Engle, in her famous novel, A Wrinkle in Time, there's this place in there where Mrs. Whatsit whispers to Meg, "Stay angry, little Meg. You will need all your anger now." There are some occasions when Christians need all of their anger, all of their grief, all of their sadness, all of their hurt to fuel and to energize love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so on that note, and I'll wrap it up with the way that I started, an unexpected surprise. Let's go back to Mr. Rogers for a second. Many people are surprised when they read the biography or they hear the story told of Fred Rogers, and they discover that behind his gentleness, the secret sauce behind his gentleness and his kind-hearted demeanor was anger and hurt. Because Fred Rogers, when he was a young boy, was mercilessly bullied for being overweight. Can you imagine Mr. Rogers being overweight? He was very thin and wiry as a TV host, but he went through a season as a child where he was overweight, and he got mercilessly ridiculed for body image issues by his peers, and it just cut so deeply to his heart, maybe in a similar way that those Pharisees cut to the heart of that prostitute as they started scolding her and shaming her and dehumanizing her with their words. And so Mr. Rogers, out of his anger and hurt at the way that he was treated and over the way that many children are treated, made a vow to himself that he would do everything that he can to protect the dignity of children, and that he would do everything that he can within his own power to make sure that children are not made to feel the way he was made to feel when he was a child. And that's how the gentleness of Fred Rogers was born. That's how the kindness of Fred Rogers was born. That's how God used a wound in Fred Rogers' life to turn him into a healer. Have you ever heard that phrase? I'm sure you have. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I just don't know how you could come up with an idea like that unless you've never been insulted, unless you've never been sharply criticized, unless you've never been scolded. Psychiatry Today, the magazine, rephrased that set of words, and they said this: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can cut me deeply. So Ann Voskamp, who is a wonderful writer and communicator and woman of God, and also a dear friend of ours, said this. She spoke this phrase that's stuck with me ever since I first heard it several years ago. She says, only, and this is the Christian application, this is the winsome life in the world application, only speak words that make souls stronger. Only speak words that make souls stronger. In other words, like Augie Pullman said in Wonder, be kind because every person you meet is fighting a hard-hidden battle. In this current dumpster fire of a moment, let's overcome that bad scented candle that I talked about at the beginning of this message. Let's bring into the rest of 2020, in a season, by the way, the Christmas holiday season, where you have more people who are spiritually interested than any other time of the year. Let's see if we can be a counterculture people, where we can be angry where it's appropriate to be angry, and where we can be grieved and sad and feel hurt, but in a way that is leveraged toward being the kinds of neighbors that are life-giving and that bring into the world the kind of stuff that Mr. Rogers did in the name of Jesus. Thank you again for having me. I'm really grateful to be with you. God bless you. I'm grateful for the leadership of your church and the way that your church has impacted my own leadership. God bless you, Saddleback.
Thank you, Scott, for that powerful message. You guys, how would the world be different if starting today we were all just a lot more gentle with others? Instead of being judgmental, instead of being temperamental, we were just gentle. It was the quality that made Jesus attractive. Jesus at one point said, "Come to me when you're tired and you're weary and you're worn out." Why? Because I am gentle of heart. He said, I'm not going to scold you. I'm not going to shame you. I'm not going to put you down. When you come to me, I am gentle of heart. I'm going to receive you. And he said, you will find rest for your soul. Do you know what? You'll find rest for your soul when you find the gentleness of Jesus in your heart. But you can only have the gentleness of Jesus in your heart when you have Jesus in your heart. Maybe you've never done that. If so, you need to open your life to the Spirit of Christ today. Why don't we just bow our heads, and I invite you to follow me in a simple prayer. Would you do that? Bow your head with me and just say something like this. Dear God, I want to know you. Just say that. Dear God, I want to get to know you. I know about you, but Jesus Christ, I know I need you in my life. I need to be more gentle and less judgmental. And I need to be more tender with people. But I ask you to be tender with me. Thank you for being gentle with me. And as much as I know how, Jesus Christ, I ask you to come into my life and make the changes that I want done and that you want to make in me. Forgive my sins. I want to turn from my way and turn to your way and follow you the rest of my life. I ask you to save me and accept me one day into your home in heaven. And I humbly ask this because of your grace. Amen.
Hi, everyone. Have you ever taken a moment to look back at your day and said, where was the gentleness? It's so funny that you sometimes think about the text that was sent or the comment that was made, maybe the email that was sent, or a conversation that you had with someone, and you just can't take it back. It's so hard to recover something like that might have been prickly, it might have been not soft, it might have been very hard for that person to hear and to deal with, and it was definitely not sent or spoken or texted with gentleness. And it's wounded a friendship. It's wounded somebody in your life that you loved and valued. Yeah, I look back at my life and I say, plenty of room for gentleness to grow in my own heart, in my own words. And I have little testimonies to this, even watching right now at home. My kids who are watching it and who know the different times where I've said things and done things that unfortunately I can't retract, I can't pull back. I can ask for forgiveness, but we can also ask for God to work in our hearts and to help us to follow Christ's model, modeling gentleness with our thoughts, with our words, with our actions each day. But we can't do that apart from knowing the one who is clothed in gentleness and humility, right? This is Christ. This is the light bearer that we talked about earlier this Advent Sunday. The one who leads us into understanding how powerful a gentle answer can really be. This morning, if you made a decision for Christ for the first time, first of all, I want to celebrate that. We love that. We want to hear from you. Maybe if you have questions too, and you're just beginning to take baby steps on your spiritual journey and to say, I'm not sure what church is all about or who Jesus is, but I want to know more. We want to celebrate that also. We love that. We love helping people along on their spiritual journey here at Saddleback Berlin, no matter where they're at. I want to encourage you right now, right there at home, to click on our online connection card. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're at right now in your own faith and your own walk this season. We want to pray for you. Maybe you're looking for spiritual counseling. Maybe you'd like to talk with me, talk with one of our spiritual leaders. We would love to have a chat with you. We can even do that over Zoom and answer any questions or hear about what's going on in your life. What's God revealing to you in areas in your life where maybe you can be specifically more gentle. We also want to encourage you to join a small group. Right now, during this season, no one should be alone. And so that's one of our primary focus. It's kind of the heartbeat of our church, of Saddleback Church, is small groups. And so if you're not in one, or if you're interested in learning more, I encourage you, just send us an email at smallgroups@saddleback.de, and we'll get back to you really soon and send you some information so you can be in a group here. We have many groups that are spread out and meeting on Zoom all throughout the city. So it has been great to be with you this morning. I want to, as we move into our final song, I encourage you to click on Give above. There's many different ways that you can conveniently give as an act of worship this Sunday morning, and giving that to God is just a tremendous way for us to say thank you to Him for all He's given us this season. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing you back here next week. Happy Advent Sunday. I love you all, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
arms open wide upon a cross, and you give no matter what the cost. Jesus, we see you. All of these words your hands have made, a billion stars stretched out in space. These are just echoes of your grace. Jesus, we see you. You are the generous giver. Your mercy overflows. Your blessing is a river. On and on it goes. You are an endless fountain. You're filling up my life. My heart will sing your praises. Jesus, you be glorified. Jesus, you reach us in our pain. Your mercy meets us every day, and your love will never turn away. Jesus, we see you. You are the generous giver. Your mercy overflows. Your blessing is a river. On and on it goes. You are an endless fountain. You're filling up my life. My heart will sing your praises. Jesus, you be glorified. And on and on, on and on, on and on. Jesus, you be glorified. And on and on and on. Jesus, you be glorified. You're so much better. You're so much kinder than anything we think you are. Your love is deeper, and your love is wider. So open our eyes to see you, God. You're so much better, and you're so much kinder than anything we think you are. And your love is deeper, and your love is wider.